If someone had told me that the worst moment of my life would happen while wearing a wedding dress, I would have laughed and called it a bad movie plot. But I'm here to tell you, sometimes the worst scenes happen right in the middle of what should be your happiest day. My name is Charli D'Amelio, and on my wedding day, my husband slapped me across the face in front of 100 guests. Not because I cheated, not because I said something cruel, but because I didn't offer my chair to his mother. That moment didn't just end my marriage, it woke me up. It all started with the chair. I know, ridiculous, right? But sometimes the most fragile threads unravel everything. The wedding was held at a luxury garden venue filled with flowers and chandeliers hanging from oak trees. I had planned it for months, every petal, every song, every seat. Peter, my fiancé, said he wanted to let me shine. I thought it was sweet. I didn't realize he meant it as an excuse to do absolutely nothing. He showed up late to the rehearsal. Didn't even memorize his vows. But I let it go. I told myself love was about patience, about compromise. That's the thing about women like me. We learn to excuse red flags like they're part of the wallpaper. On the day of the wedding, everything looked perfect. My dress shimmered in the sunlight. My best friend cried when I walked down the aisle. Peter actually smiled when he saw me. For a moment, I believed. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception. Speeches, dancing, laughter, then dinner. We sat at the long head table, and as people got up to move around, I noticed Peter's mother, Mrs. Johnson, standing off to the side. I assumed someone would bring her a chair. There were dozens around, but instead she walked over to our table and stared at me. "Charli," she said, her voice cool. "A bride should know better than to sit when her mother-in-law has nowhere to sit." I blinked. Was she serious? I stood halfway, gesturing to an empty chair just 5 feet away. "There's one right there," I said politely. "Let me ask someone to bring it over." But she didn't budge. Peter suddenly stood up, towering over me. And then, before I could say another word, he slapped me. Hard, across the face. My head jerked sideways. My veil came loose. Someone gasped. I stood there frozen. Tears welled up in my eyes, not just from the sting, but from the sheer disbelief. Peter's voice rang out. "You embarrassed my mother." He didn't look sorry. He looked cold, calculated, like he had been waiting for this moment. Everything after that was a blur. People started whispering. Some stood, unsure whether to leave. Mrs. Johnson smirked. Actually smirked, like this was all part of her plan. I turned to Peter. "This is how you treat your wife?" I asked, my voice shaking. He shrugged. "Maybe you shouldn't act like trash in front of my family." And that's when I knew. This wasn't about a chair. This was about control. Power, and putting me in my place. I walked out. Didn't run. Didn't cry. I walked through the tables, past the shocked guests, straight to the valet. Still in my gown, still with frosting in my hair from the cake he had later knocked over during some tantrum. I didn't stick around to watch. That night, I lay on the floor of my apartment, still in my wedding dress, mascara streaked down my cheeks, staring at the ceiling like it might have an answer. My phone rang nonstop. Calls from Peter, from his mom, from family members who said things like, "He didn't mean it," or "You know how his temper is," or worst of all, "Let's not blow this out of proportion." I blocked them all. Then I picked up the phone and called someone who actually mattered. My old friend from college, Hayes, a former journalist turned private investigator. "Hayes," I said, voice low, "I need to know who I just married." Hayes didn't ask questions when I called. He simply said, "Send me what you know. I'll handle the rest." Within 2 days, he had a file. Thick, detailed, terrifying. Peter wasn't just emotionally abusive. He was hiding things. Big things. For starters, Peter had 2 separate bank accounts under different names. One of them showed a series of large, unexplained transfers, money going in and out without any business explanation. Hayes tracked one payment to a property under Mrs. Johnson's name, a warehouse, not registered to any operating business. "Charli," Hayes said, "I don't think this is just about control. I think this is a cover-up, possibly fraud. Maybe worse." I felt sick. I had married into a mess. And it wasn't just Peter. It was his entire family. I remembered little things suddenly, off comments that never made sense. Peter's obsession with keeping receipts locked in his desk. Mrs. Johnson saying, "Some things are better not written down." At the time, I thought it was just their weird quirkiness. Now I saw it for what it really was. Secrets. Shady ones. Hayes kept digging. A week later, he sent me a recording. He had wired the office Peter used for family finances. The audio was muffled but clear enough. Peter and Mrs. Johnson talking about a client who's asking too many questions and needing to move the files before someone checks the accounts. My blood went cold. This wasn't just messy money. It sounded like money laundering. And I had unknowingly signed off on a few of those transfers, under pressure, thinking they were for charity donations or joint purchases. I had proof. And now, I had a choice. I met Hayes in person at a quiet cafe in the suburbs. He slid a folder toward me. Inside was a full report: names, places, timelines, audio transcripts. "You could go to the police with this," he said softly. "Or we make a bigger move." I looked up. "What do you mean? You want revenge or resolution?" I thought about that. Really thought. Then I said, "I want both." We came up with a plan. A public one. We would collect just a little more, enough to back up everything, and then create a moment they couldn't control. Something loud, unstoppable, and absolutely humiliating. Meanwhile, Peter kept trying to spin the narrative. He told people I was overreacting, that I was too sensitive, that I had a flair for the dramatic. Classic gaslighting. But the best part? He didn't know I was watching. Recording. Collecting. Sophie was my rock during this time. She moved in with me temporarily. We built a wall of evidence in my apartment. Literally. Photos, charts, printed emails. She called it Charlie's Justice Room. We'd sip wine at night, reading transcripts, piecing together who knew what and when. It was awful. It was empowering. It was necessary. Then came the last straw. Peter tried to sue me for emotional damage and defamation. Yes, seriously. He claimed I had ruined his reputation after leaving the wedding, and he was suffering financially and psychologically. He wanted $200,000 in damages. I laughed so hard I cried. Then I called Hayes. "It's time," I said. "Let's bring it all down." We picked a date. A charity gala hosted by one of Peter's business associates. Someone who thought Peter was a model husband and sharp young businessman. The irony. Peter and Mrs. Johnson were both expected to be there. So was the press. And the donors. And just enough of their fragile reputation. Perfect. I walked into the ballroom in a black jumpsuit and heels I could actually run in. Sophie walked beside me, looking like an angel in red, and holding a tiny flash drive in her clutch. Hayes was already inside, blending in, ready to cue the big moment. Peter spotted me across the room. His eyes narrowed. He walked toward me, all fake confidence. "Charli," he said through clenched teeth, "what are you doing here?" I smiled. "Same as you, enjoying the lies." He didn't respond. He didn't have time, because the lights dimmed, and the projector lit up. At first, the crowd assumed it was a charity video. Then the audio began. Peter's voice. And Mrs. Johnson's. Clear as day. "Move the files before someone checks. The client is getting suspicious." Gasps. Whispers. A few phones raised to record. Then the images appeared. Photos of the warehouse. Transactions. Signatures. Emails. My name on some of them, but with annotations showing they were forged or signed under duress. Then, a clip of the wedding. Peter slapping me. Right in the middle of the celebration. Unedited, undeniable. The room went silent. And then, everyone turned to look at him. Peter stammered. "It's fake! This is fake! This is some edited—" "Actually," Hayes said, stepping forward and flashing his badge, "we've already submitted this to the authorities. You're free to explain it again, under oath." Mrs. Johnson tried to leave. 2 officers stopped her. Handcuffs clicked. Peter's face went pale. "You did this," he said to me. "You did this to yourself," I replied. The next few days were chaos. The video went viral. Justice for Charli. Slap and trap. Everyone had an opinion. But no one defended Peter anymore. Not even his lawyer. He was arrested within 48 hours. So was Mrs. Johnson. Charges: fraud, forgery, abuse, attempted financial manipulation, and assault. Because slapping your bride? Yeah, that's a crime. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. But I felt power. Real power. The kind that comes from taking your voice back. From saying, "I will not stay quiet so you can stay comfortable." The court process was long. Ugly. But I didn't flinch. I testified. So did Hayes. Even Sophie. And when Peter tried to spin his story, the judge shut him down with 6 words. "You're not the victim here, Mr. Johnson." He was sentenced to 12 years. Mrs. Johnson got 6. I walked out of that courtroom in the same black jumpsuit I wore the night of the gala. Sophie was waiting outside. We didn't say anything, just hugged. And for the first time since the slap, I felt clean, like I had rinsed every lie from my skin. 6 months after the verdict, I moved to Texas. I didn't announce it. I didn't need to. Sometimes healing happens quietly, without hashtags or headlines. I bought a small house near a lake. Big windows. Bare feet on wooden floors. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. I started painting again. At first, just to pass the time. But then something happened. The colors got brighter. My strokes got bolder. I was no longer painting to escape. I was painting because I had something to say. I opened a small gallery. Named it Second Breath. People came, not because I was famous, but because the art said what words often couldn't. And in that space, women would linger. They'd talk to me after. Some whispered, "I saw your video." Others said, "Your story saved me." Every time I looked them in the eye and said, "You saved yourself. I just reminded you how." I never spoke to Peter again. Not once. No letters from prison. No requests. And even if he had tried, I would have ignored it. Because some doors don't deserve to be knocked on, much less reopened. As for love, it came back. Not in the way I expected. Not through a man, but through me. Through mornings when I woke up excited again. Through friendships that felt like family. Through the deep, quiet truth that I am no longer afraid of being alone. Because I'm no longer afraid of myself. People still ask, what would you say to the old you? The one sitting in a wedding dress, mascara smeared, staring at the ceiling. I'd say this: get up. Not because they said you couldn't, but because you finally remember you can. And she would. And she did. If you've ever been humiliated, manipulated, or made to feel like your voice doesn't matter, let me tell you, it does. You do. You don't have to scream to be strong. You just have to stand, even if your knees shake, especially when your voice cracks. Because one day, that voice will steady, that stand will strengthen. And you'll become someone you actually want to be.